Last month, a friend of the outdoor community spent 3 days in jail. Not for a crime, but for what he calls a paperwork dispute that goes much deeper than you might think. Dave Heavy D Sparks, who's a truck enthusiast, a helicopter pilot, search and rescue volunteer, and star of Discovery Channel's Diesel Brothers, found himself behind bars in a case that has divided opinions and sparked fierce debate across social media. But this isn't really about Heavy D, or diesel trucks, or even environmental lawyers. This is something that affects all of us who love wild places. The delicate balance between freedom and responsibility in outdoor recreation. And I'm saying this as someone who has spent a lifetime in the backcountry. I was an off-piste skier, a former snow kite athlete, a rock climber, an avalanche rescue tech, an outdoor educator, a canoe tripper, and a long-distance hiker. I've witnessed firsthand the incredible beauty of wild places and the privilege of moving through them freely. I've also seen the damage that can occur when that freedom is exercised without responsibility. My purpose here isn't to take sides in Heavy D's legal battle, but it's to use this case as a launching point for a conversation I think we all need to have. The question is, how do we preserve access to wild places for future generations? Let's start with the facts stripped of the rhetoric that has surrounded this case on both sides. In 2017, a group called the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment filed a lawsuit against Heavy D and his Diesel Brothers co-stars, alleging that they had violated the Clean Air Act by removing the emissions control devices from some of the diesel trucks that they were involved with. This practice is often called deleting, and it involves removing diesel particulate filters and other pollution control equipment ostensibly to improve performance and simplify the repair process. In 2020, U.S. District Judge Robert J. Shelby ruled against the defendants and ordered them to pay approximately $843,602 in penalties and attorney's fees. The judge also issued orders requiring financial disclosures and prohibiting the transfer of assets. This is where things kind of started to get complicated. Heavy D was arrested October 7th, 2025, after Judge Shelby found him in contempt of court because he was failing to pay the fees and for repeatedly violating court orders. After 3 days in custody and a hearing where parties reached an agreement about the required disclosures, he was released. Now here's where the narrative splits. Heavy D and his lawyer argue that this wasn't about refusing to pay rightfully owed money, but it was about standing up against excessive attorney's fees in what they characterized as a paperwork dispute, rather than a criminal matter. They claim the original lawsuit sought $114 million for modifications to just 20 trucks, an amount that they describe as absurd. On the other side, environmental advocates point to real-world impacts. Testing on one modified truck purchased directly from Sparks Motors showed that it emitted 36 times the legal limit for greenhouse gases and 21 times the limit for particulate emissions. These aren't abstract numbers. These are pollutants that affect air quality and public health, particularly in areas like Salt Lake City that already struggle with winter air quality. But here's what makes this case more than just a legal dispute. Heavy D's paradoxical role in the outdoor community. His team operates a Black Hawk helicopter that they use on occasion for search and rescue missions. They've helped countless stranded off-roaders. They've built a community around outdoor adventure and heavy machinery. By all accounts, they've done genuine good. Yet while Heavy D may have personally modified only 20 trucks, his platform reaches 4.5 million YouTube subscribers and 3.8 million Instagram followers. The influence of that reach, the cultural message sent out that emissions equipment being garbage with no real value of protecting the environment, as one co-defendant put it, extends far beyond those 20 vehicles. This is the paradox at the heart of so many outdoor recreation conflicts. The same people who love wild places enough to risk their lives rescuing others can simultaneously engage in activities that harm those places. It's not hypocrisy, it's human complexity. And it's a complexity that every outdoor enthusiast needs to grapple with. Well, if you're watching this thinking, well, I don't have a big diesel truck, so this doesn't really affect me, I invite you to reconsider. The patterns at play in Heavy D's case, they echo through every corner of outdoor recreation. we're not so different from each other as we might think. I've spent countless hours on rock faces, feeling the texture of stone under my fingers, solving vertical puzzles in some of the most beautiful places on Earth. And for decades, the Access Fund has fought to defend the use of fixed anchors in wildlife areas, facing recent threats from the National Park Service, which began defining climbing anchors as prohibited installations. One wilderness management plan after another has attempted to restrict or to ban the hardware that makes climbing possible. The climbing community has argued, rightly so in my view, that climbing is a legitimate wilderness use with minimal impact. Yet scientific studies reveal that rock climbing does impact cliff ecosystems through trampling of rare plants, vegetation removal during root establishment, and disturbance of species that have found refuge in these inaccessible cliff ecosystems. These cliff habitats harbor rare, endemic, and glacial relic species that exist nowhere else. Are these impacts catastrophic? In most cases, no. Are they worth acknowledging and minimizing? Absolutely yes. I've been places here in Canada that are known around the world for their top-notch climbing, and because we can't bolt our anchors, I've seen some of the most destructive anchor setups, like strapping around cedar tree roots that are just precariously placed on the Canadian Shield. Not only are these anchors potentially deadly for climbers, they're arguably more destructive to the environment than a bolted anchor ever could be. Yellowstone National Park became ground zero for the snowmobile debate, with the park seeing up to 87,000 snowmobile visits during the winter of 2001-2002. The controversy spawned over dozens of lawsuits and ping-ponged between administrations. Environmental concerns included the air quality impacts that were so severe, park rangers were required to wear respirators during the busiest parts of the winter seasons, along with noise pollution and wildlife disturbances. The Clinton administration moved to just completely ban snowmobiles, like ban them entirely, but the Bush administration reversed that decision, and courts intervened repeatedly. Snowmobile manufacturers developed cleaner technology in the meantime. The saga consumed years of legal battles and millions in legal fees. Sound familiar? Throughout this conflict, snowmobile enthusiasts made valid points about the economic impacts on gateway communities and the importance of winter access to public lands. Environmental groups raised legitimate concerns about wildlife, air quality, and the fundamental purpose of national parks. Both sides were right about some things, but also wrong about others. As a backcountry skier, I've experienced the freedom of earning my turns far from the crowds and machinery of ski resorts, but I have also witnessed conflicts over off-piste access across Europe. I've seen avalanche closures ignored by those who think that they know better, and I've watched wildlife forced from critical winter ranges by eager powder hounds. The backcountry skiing boom has brought more people into fragile alpine environments during the season when wildlife is most vulnerable and energy conservation is critical for survival. A fascinating study of recreationists in Bear Ears National Monument documented what researchers called a paradox. Users valued the landscape as wilderness while simultaneously experiencing and contributing to socioeconomical dynamics that undermined these very values. They called it being loved to death. This resonates deeply with my own experiences. I've stood on summits accessible only through hard-earned efforts, feeling like I've touched something sacred and wild. Yet my presence there, the chalk on the rock, the boot pack in the snow, the tent platform in the alpine meadow, all contribute incrementally to the erosion of that wilderness. The COVID-19 pandemic threw this tension into sharp relief. Parks experience both benefits and problems from shifting recreation patterns. Some areas saw reduced environmental impacts during closures, while others suffered from overcrowding, increased resource damage, and intensified user conflicts as people sought outdoor spaces during lockdowns. I remember visiting my favorite climbing areas during the pandemic, and I found them completely overrun with newbies. No bad to the newbies, but chalk was everywhere. Erosion from these new social trails was popping up, and toilet paper was everywhere in the bushes. My first instinct was to enlist gatekeeping. These people don't belong here, I would say. But that's not the answer either. We all started somewhere. The question is, how do we educate and integrate new users before they cause lasting damage? When communities fail to self-regulate, restrictions come from outside. They're often more severe and less nuanced than they need to be. The Access Fund has warned that without addressing the challenge posed by waves of undereducated climbers, outdoor enthusiasts face increasing rules, regulations, fines, permitting, and closures. And this isn't theoretical. In Mallorca, Spain, severe climbing access problems have emerged with fees of up to 10 euros per person and permanent forest guards enforcing restrictions at famous cliffs across the region. In the overcrowded Italian mountains, authorities have studied public acceptance of these access restrictions. Across Europe and North America, beloved recreation areas face increasing regulation as land managers struggle with overuse. And the pattern is consistent. Unmanaged growth in recreation leads to environmental impacts, which leads to restrictions, which leads to resentment, which leads to conflict. It's a cycle that benefits no one. Despite our different sports and sometimes opposing perspectives as outdoor enthusiasts, we share fundamental common ground. We all want continued access to wild places. We all value the freedom to pursue our passions. We all hope to pass healthy ecosystems to future generations. We all thrive in vibrant outdoor communities. The question isn't whether we share these values, it's whether we're willing to act on them, even when it requires sacrifice or confronting uncomfortable truths within our own communities. Now, Heavy D's team does some things remarkably right. Their helicopter search and rescue operations have helped save lives. Their assistance to stranded off-roaders has prevented what could have been tragic situations from escalating. They've helped countless families find closure after helping solve missing persons cases. My favorite episode of their YouTube channel was after a giant storm, like an unprecedented amount of snowfall near Heavy D's winter cabin in like the mountains of Utah. Now, he ended up bringing up all of this heavy machinery to help clear the roads in his neighbors' driveways. Now, I'm not saying that this was just a regular snowfall where he's just helping his neighbors out with shoveling. No. I'm talking like unprecedented levels of snow where people's roofs were caving in because of the amount of snow that was up there. He showed his own cabin where even the second story windows, he needed to access through like the second story windows into his house because there's that much snow. They've built this passionate community around outdoor adventure and mechanical ingenuity. They've used their platform to connect millions of people with outdoor experiences. These are not trivial contributions. This is exactly the kind of community stewardship that makes outdoor recreation both sustainable and safe. So what can we learn both from what they do well and from where things went wrong? The relationship between freedom and responsibility isn't optional, it's fundamental. The more responsibly we act, the more freedom we preserve. The less responsibility we take, the more restrictions we invite. Climbing gyms bear responsibility for educating new climbers about outdoor ethics before they transition from plastic to rock. The same principle applies across all outdoor activities, whether you're introducing someone to skiing, off-roading, mountain biking, or paddling. Education about environmental impact and community norms must be part of that introduction. Leave no trace principles provide an excellent framework, but they must be adapted to each specific activity. Climbers need to understand chalk use, human waste disposal, and the importance of minimizing new route development. Skiers need to know about wildlife winter ranges, avalanche safety, and forest regeneration. Off-roaders need education about soil cryptobiotic crusts, and stream crossings and staying on designated trails. And of course, paddlers also need to understand aquatic invasive species, shoreline erosion, and wildlife nesting seasons. I've made it a personal practice to spend that little extra time with newcomers that I meet in the field, not lecturing, but sharing stories that illustrate why certain practices matter. See that boot pack cutting straight up the meadow? Well, in a few years, it'll become a permanent erosion gully. But look at that switchbacking skin track. It protects the vegetation and will last 100 seasons. Education works best when it's specific, it's positive, and it's grounded in genuine care for the places that we love. The best managed outdoor communities police themselves. Leave no trace principles for climbers emphasize using established trails, proper waste management, respecting seasonal closures, and keeping group sizes small. When climbers see chalk marks proliferating on a boulder problem, many now carry brushes to clean up that excess chalk. I know I sure do. When boulderers encounter pad stashing or leaving your crash pads hidden in the woods, experienced climbers educate newbies about why this attracts wildlife and it damages vegetation. In the snowmobile community, properly maintained modern snowmobiles produce significantly less noise and emissions than older models, with illegal aftermarket modifications being the primary source of most of the problems. Responsible snowmobile clubs could make it culturally unacceptable to run modified exhausts or to ride in closed areas, but this requires community will. Every outdoor community faces a choice: police ourselves or be policed by others. Self-regulation is always preferable. It's more nuanced, it's more educational, and it's more likely to preserve the freedom we all value. But it requires courage to call out fellow community members when they're standing out of line. This is perhaps the most difficult principle because it requires discernment. Not all restrictions are reasonable or necessary. Some are implemented by land managers who don't understand the activities that they're regulating. Some are overly broad and, well, some deserve to be challenged. But some restrictions are legitimate and necessary. When climbing areas are closed to protect nesting birds during breeding seasons, responsible climbers should find other cliffs. There are plenty of options. When avalanche forecasters close terrain due to extreme danger, it's not government overreach. It's life-saving information. Take it from a former avalanche tech. Wildlife winter range closures protect animals during their most vulnerable season. Seasonal trail closures prevent muddy trails from becoming permanently damaged. Fire restrictions during drought prevent entire ecosystems from catastrophic loss. And I'll be honest, I have rolled my eyes at plenty of restrictions that seem unnecessary. I have grumbled about closures that affect my personal plans, but I've learned over the years that fighting every restriction undermines credibility when you're opposing truly unreasonable ones. Choose your battles wisely. Comply with legitimate restrictions. Challenge unreasonable ones through proper channels and with solid evidence and constructive alternatives. The outdoor recreation community's reputation as responsible land users depends on demonstrating that we can actually be trusted to follow rules designed to protect the resources that we claim to love. Membership matters. The Access Fund, which advocates for climber access, had only like 13,500 members in 2015, despite there being an estimated 11 million people who climbed that year. That's barely less than 0.1%. Political influence scales with membership numbers. When advocacy organizations approach legislators, their power comes directly from how many people they represent. So join organizations that advocate for your sport. If you're into climbing, look into the Access Fund or the American Alpine Club. If you're here in Canada, it's the Alpine Club of Canada. If you're into winter recreation, look into the Winter Wildlands Alliance for backcountry rec. Look into your local trail organizations and associations. Look into your state off-road vehicle or paddling organizations. Participate in public comment periods when land management plans are being developed. These comments matter way more than you think. Land managers are required to respond to substantive public input, and well-reasoned comments can shape public outcomes. Build bridges with environmental organizations rather than treating them as enemies. Many conflicts arise from misunderstandings rather than fundamental incompatibility. I've sat in meetings where climbers and conservation biologists have found common ground protecting nesting raptors while maintaining climbing access outside of breeding seasons. I've seen snowmobile clubs work with wildlife biologists to route trails away from critical winter habitats while still preserving connectivity between these different riding areas. Constructive advocacy means showing up with solutions, not just complaints. It means demonstrating that your community can be trusted as partners in land stewardship. This is the hardest principle to practice because it creates this kind of social friction within communities that pride themselves on camaraderie and mutual support, but it's also the most critical. When someone in your community trashes their campsite, call them out for it. When they harass wildlife, speak up. When they ignore closures or they brag about it online, make it clear that that kind of behavior is unacceptable. When they modify their equipment to produce more noise or pollution, let them know that they're damaging access for everyone. This doesn't mean being self-righteous or aggressive. It means setting and enforcing community norms. Saying things like, hey man, I know you're excited about that video, but posting footage of riding in that closed area is going to bring a little bit more restriction down on all of us. You mind taking it down? Make it socially costly to behave irresponsibly. Make it socially rewarding to be a good steward. Culture shifts when peer pressure aligns with positive values. Heavy D has acknowledged regretting some past emissions modifications, and that's not a small thing. Admitting error requires courage, especially when there are millions watching. His platform could be immensely powerful for promoting responsible off-roading and motorized recreation. His search and rescue work demonstrates the positive potential of his community engagement. Imagine if Heavy D and the Diesel Brothers leaned even further towards advocating for modern emission-compliant off-road vehicles and educating about proper trail use and partnering with land managers to ensure continued access. Just imagine if the Diesel Brothers brand became synonymous with responsible recreation alongside mechanical excellence. That's the path forward, not just for Heavy D, but for all of us who wield influence in our respective communities. The stakes in this conversation extend far beyond individual legal cases or specific restrictions. Climate change is already transforming where and when we can recreate. Shorter winters threaten skiing, longer fire seasons close mountains for months, changing precipitation patterns affect river flows for paddling. These are existential challenges for outdoor recreation. Political threats to public lands continue, with over 50 bills in the United States attacking federal public land management introduced to Congress in the last couple years. Efforts to transfer federal lands to states where they can be sold to private interests without public approval continue to be active. We need allies, not more divisions between outdoor communities. The climber and the off-roader have way more in common with each other than either of them has with those who would want to eliminate public land access entirely. The skier and the snowmobiler both need winter access to wild places. We need to be finding common cause, not fighting each other. Every time any of us heads into the backcountry, we're casting a vote on whether our grandchildren will have the same freedom. That vote is tallied not in ballot boxes, but in our daily choices. Will we stay on the trail or will we cut the switchback? Will we pack out our waste or will we bury it? Will we respect the closure or will we make that little exception just this one time for me? Will we educate the newcomer or ignore their mistakes? Will we call out the bad actor or are we just going to stay silent to avoid conflict? Be the ambassador for your sport that you'd want representing you. Praise good behavior loudly and educate gently but persistently. Self-regulate firmly when needed. Remember, the goal isn't to restrict access, it's to preserve access by being responsible stewards of the places we love. Heavy D's case isn't really about diesel trucks or environmental lawyers or attorneys' fees. It's a mirror reflecting a question we all face. Whether we're turning wrenches on a lifted truck, chalking up for a climb, or paddling into a wilderness lake. The question is, Do we love wild places enough to protect them from our own impacts? The answer we give through our actions, not our words, will determine whether future generations inherit the same freedoms that we've enjoyed, or whether they'll find gates where we found open trails, restrictions where we found welcome, and regulations where we found trust. The choice is ours. Every day, every trip, every interaction with newcomers and veterans alike. So let's choose wisely.